The idea behind problem number 2 was to write equations whose graphs are parallel to the first equation. So the slope remains the same, and what changes is the y-intercept. So as long as you write a second equation that has this same slope, but then you change the y-intercept, in this case it's -4, then you will have parallel lines. Those lines will never intersect. There will never be a solution to those systems of equations. So how do you write a second equation, make it a little bit more difficult than just simply changing the y-intercept? So what I want to do is use the distributive property. So if I introduce parentheses around this x minus 4 or x plus -4, same thing, then I have two equations that are, two expressions anyway, that are not equivalent, and so their equations will graph to parallel lines because they have the same slope, but they're just going to cross the y-axis at a different place. So if I use the distributive property to simplify this expression, I'm going to get 3/4 x plus a -3, not -4, but -3. So it has a different y-intercept. And if you look here, 3/4 times -4, -4 divided by 4 is -1. -1 times 3 is this -3 right here. So I started out with this expression. And so how do I get from here to here? How do I turn this into an expression that is not simplified, that includes the distributive? You have to use the distributive property to simplify it. Well, you factor out the 3/4. So divide 3/4 x by 3/4. 3/4 divided by 3/4 is equal to 1. So that's going to give you that 1 here or that 1 here, same thing. And then divide this -3 by 3/4. Well, -3 divided by 3/4 is equal to a -3 times 4/3 equals -4. So that gives you this -4 right here. Or you can use the inverse operation and the additive inverse, and so it's subtracting a +4 here. These two are the same. And notice that when you simplify them, you get a different y-intercept. So their graphs will be parallel to the first equation, but have a different y-intercept. So here's that first equation. So it's 3/4 x plus a -4 or 3/4 x minus 4. Those are the same things. Then I just put the parentheses right here. So x minus 4. And then if you simplify that, you get a different y-intercept. Now, going through a lot of stuff here, this is just practice. It's just practice manipulating equations, understanding the patterns. I'm going to show you some of those in a few moments, but it's useful practice to use the distributive property and go back and forth and to factor out numbers that aren't that easy to factor out. So factor out 3/4 in this case. So, and that's what I did right here. 3/4 divided by 3/4 and a -3 divided by 3/4. All right, so what if we took this expression here and factored out 3/4? So rewrote this using the distributive property. So I have 3/4 x plus a -4. I'm going to factor out 3/4 from both of these terms. Well, we just did 3/4 divided by 3/4 x divided by 3/4, which is 1. So that's this 1 right here. And so what about -4? What's -4 divided by 3/4? Well, -4 divided by 3/4, same as -4 times 4/3. That gives you a -16/3. So if I write a -16/3 in this spot right here, when I use the distributive property, I'm going to get back this equation, either this form right here or this form right here, depending on how I do it. So 3/4 x, so it has the same slope, but a different y-intercept. 3/4 times a -16/3 is going to give you a -12/3, which is a -4. All right, the point is that I can use any value for this term right here, except for -16/3. If I use a -16/3, the equations are going to be equivalent, and I'm going to have an infinite number of solutions. Anything else, the equations are going to graph to a line that's parallel, and a different y-intercept. So all of these forms are the same, actually. So 3/4 x plus -3 is the same as 3/4 x minus 3. So use the inverse operation and the additive inverse. And this is x minus 4, x plus a -4, same idea, inverse operation, additive inverse. And if you use the distributive property to simplify either of these, you get these two equations down here. So these are all equal and can be used as a second equation with no solutions. So it's useful for students to go through this. Use the distributive property to simplify this. Make sure you get these expressions. Understand why these two expressions are the same. Understand why these two terms, this term right here, what's inside the parentheses here is equal to what's inside the parentheses here. It's really not a separate term. All right, so let's play around with this a little bit more. So I use the parentheses and I set this part off. If I use the distributive property now, in every case I'm going to get a slope of 3/4 because it's going to be 3/4 times x. And then we're going to figure out what the y-intercept is. And I wrote this up here just to remind myself I can't use 16/3. So down here I am going to use 16/3 just to show you that equation. But all of these, what I'm going to do is use multiples of 4 because I'm going to multiply by fourths. So this will be a whole number. So -8 divided by 4 is a -2, -1, 0, 4 divided by 4 is 1. This is 2, 12 divided by 4 is 3, 16 divided by 4 is 4, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. And then 16/3, once again, is going to give me this original equation. Using the distributive property, you're always going to get a slope of 3/4 because you're always going to multiply 3/4 times 1x or 3/4 times x. So these are all going to be 3/4 x when you simplify them. But what is going to end up being the y-intercept begins with multiples of 4. So 8, 4, 0, 4, 8, 12, 16, and 20. And then those are multiplied by 3/4. So these over here, the actual y-intercept is going to change by multiples of 3. So this one is 6, and 6 is 3/4 of 8. So 2, 4, 6, 8. If you count by 2's, 2, 4, 6 is 3/4 of 8. 3/4 of 4 is 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 3/4 is 1, 2, 3. 3/4 of 0 is 0. 3/4 of 4, once again, is 3. 3/4 of 8, once again, is 6. 2, 4, 6, 8. 2, 4, 6 is 3/4. 3/4 of 12 is 9. 3, 6, 9, 12. And 3/4 is 3, 6, 9. 3/4 of 16 is 12. 4, 8, 12, 16. And 3/4 is 4, 8, 12. And 3/4 of 20 is 15. 5, 10, 15, 20. 3/4 is 5, 10, 15. So these change by multiples of 3 because these change by multiples of 4, and you're multiplying by 3/4. And the last one here, 3/4 of 16 is 12. So right here, this 16, 3/4 of that 16 is that 12. So 3/4 of this 16 is also going to be 12. But now these things are 16/3. So 3/4 of 16/3, well, 16 of these things called thirds, is going to give you 12 of these things called thirds. So 3/4 of 16/3 equals 12/3, and 12/3 simplifies to 4. So you get 3x minus 4, or 3x plus a -4, which is the original equation. So it's the same, it will graph to the same line as the original graph. All of these others will be parallel lines. So they will never intersect, have the same slope, but different y-intercepts.